The following animation is based on the first-hand account of Richard Bissell Jr., former CIA Deputy Director for Plans, from his memoir, Reflections of a Cold Warrior, From Yalta to the Bay of Pigs, published by the Yale University Press in 1996, available through the CIA's Public Archives and Reading Room. Many operational details of Project Palladium remain classified or were never publicly documented. As a result, object sizes, distances, altitudes, speeds, timing, and the sequence of events depicted here are intended only to illustrate the underlying concepts and should not be interpreted as being to scale. The animation focuses on the specific operation described in the published memoir and does not attempt to portray the entirety of Project Palladium, which consisted of multiple intelligence missions employing a variety of deception techniques over an extended period. Where historical details are uncertain or remain unavailable, reasonable visual approximations have been used solely to aid understanding. By the early 1960s, the Cold War had become a global contest of technology, espionage, and nuclear deterrence. Following the failed Bay of Pigs invasion, Soviet military forces poured into Cuba, bringing Soviet air defenses and military infrastructure to the doorstep of the United States. As tensions escalated toward the Cuban Missile Crisis, both superpowers raced to understand each other's capabilities, knowing exactly what Soviet radar systems could detect and how their operators would respond became a matter of strategic importance, essential to building requirements for America's next-generation, high-speed, low-observable reconnaissance aircraft. It was in this climate that the CIA launched one of its most unusual intelligence operations, Project Palladium. At the height of the Cold War, Naval Air Station Key West served as one of America's most important frontline military bases. Located just 90 miles from Cuba, it supported continuous fighter patrols, reconnaissance missions, and naval operations as the U.S. monitored the rapidly escalating Soviet military buildup. U.S. destroyers and submarines routinely patrolled the surrounding waters, maintaining a constant military presence. This established the ideal environment for covert intelligence missions. High-altitude reconnaissance missions conducted by CIA and U.S. Air Force U-2 spy aircraft provided U.S. intelligence with detailed aerial photography of Soviet missile sites and the air defense network protecting them. Analysts identified the locations and layouts of early warning radars such as the P-12 Spoon Rest and P-30 Big Mesh, along with SA-2 Guideline surface-to-air missile batteries equipped with fan-song fire control radars. While aerial imagery revealed where these systems were deployed, it could not answer a critical question. Exactly how small of a radar target could they detect? Project Palladium was designed to find out. Although no photographs or technical drawings of the Palladium balloon system have ever been released, the underlying technology was already well established by 1949. Inventor Leon Kromak received a U.S. patent titled Airborne Corner Reflector, which described a balloon containing an internal radar reflector, demonstrating that calibrated airborne radar targets were technically feasible more than a decade before Project Palladium. Months before the operation began, CIA scientists and engineers were developing plans to collect the required intelligence. Their solution was an elegantly controlled experiment. A U.S. Navy destroyer equipped with a powerful electronic warfare transmitter would generate convincing false aircraft returns just beyond the Soviet radar horizon, provoking Cuban air defense operators into tracking and intercepting the contacts. At the same time, a covert submarine would quietly position itself closer to shore, carrying a series of carefully calibrated balloon-borne radar targets. Bissell's memoir describes these as metallized, calibrated, balloon-borne radar targets, each presenting a progressively larger radar cross-section. By releasing targets of known radar signature while monitoring Soviet radio communications, U.S. intelligence could determine the minimum radar cross-section operators were able to detect, report, and react to. In the tense months following the failed Bay of Pigs invasion, Cuban air defense crews remained on heightened alert, expecting the possibility of another American incursion at any moment. Unbeknownst to Cuban radar controllers, this would become a day of carefully staged deception. Just outside Havana, a Soviet-built P-12 spoon rest radar swept the skies, its low-altitude radar horizon reaching roughly 50 miles into the surrounding airspace. Within that invisible boundary, this station would become the focus of a covert operation designed to make its operators see something that wasn't really there. To carry out the operation, a U.S. Navy diesel-electric submarine and destroyer departed the waters off Key West, each playing a carefully coordinated role. While the exact vessels remain classified, a Forrest Sherman-class destroyer and a Guppy-modified submarine would have been representative of the types operating from the region during this period. The submarine's mission was to quietly approach the Cuban coastline and wait to release the balloons, each designed to present a different radar cross-section. Meanwhile, the destroyer remained farther offshore, carrying a powerful electronic warfare transmitter that just barely breached the Soviet radar horizon. Working together, the two platforms would create convincing but entirely artificial radar targets, allowing U.S. intelligence to measure what Soviet radar operators could detect, how they classified the contacts, and how they responded, all without risking an actual reconnaissance aircraft. As the destroyer approached the edge of the Soviet radar horizon, the electronic deception operation began. The destroyer's transmitter projected convincing radar echoes beyond the Soviet radar horizon. To Cuban radar operators, the contacts appeared to be unidentified aircraft approaching from the Florida Straits. The tracks propagated across multiple radar sites, triggering an air defense response. Ground controllers ordered interceptor aircraft into the air, likely Soviet-built MiG-21s that served in Cuba during this period, to investigate the apparent intrusion. Yet there was nothing to intercept. As the simulated targets reached the planned termination point, the electronic transmissions ceased, the radar contacts vanished, and the fighters were left searching empty sky before returning to base. Meanwhile, operating just offshore, the submarine briefly exposed itself to deploy the balloons with progressively larger radar cross-sections. As expected, the smallest balloons passed unnoticed, but the two largest generated radar returned strong enough to appear as additional aircraft on Cuban radar scopes. Ground controllers immediately radioed the MiGs, returning from the intercept attempt, reporting two new contacts and directing them back toward the apparent intruders. Still hidden offshore, the submarine was monitoring the Cuban radio communications. The intercepted messages confirmed the operation's objective, determining exactly which radar signatures provoked a defensive response, how small of a contact the radars could detect, and how the operators handled the situation. Without ever being detected, the submarine quietly withdrew, carrying invaluable intelligence back to the United States. Hidden for decades from public view, Project Palladium remains one of the most remarkable examples of electronic deception ever acknowledged by the CIA. The operations demonstrated that carefully engineered electronic deception could convince sophisticated military radar systems and the people operating them that aircraft existed where none actually did. More importantly, the intelligence gathered helped the United States better understand Soviet air defenses and informed the development and employment of future low-observable reconnaissance aircraft, all while avoiding unnecessary risk to American air crews. Project Palladium also established a historical precedent. Military forces have deliberately created convincing unknown radar contacts for intelligence purposes. More than 60 years later, the operation serves as a documented reminder that extraordinary radar contacts do not always require extraordinary explanations. Thank you for watching. I hope this reconstruction has helped present the available evidence in a clear and engaging way. If you enjoyed this video, please consider liking, subscribing, and sharing it with others who have an interest in aviation, military history, and unexplained phenomena.